Hey, it's Shane with GotRom.com. I want to talk about low back mobility versus stability, and which one do you need? So in recent years, two great coaches and thinkers, physical therapists and strength coaches, Mike Boyle and Gray Cook, have popularized a concept called the joint-by-joint approach to training. And it kind of lays out this framework that, in general, different joints in the body in an alternating fashion need either more mobility or more stability. So when you kind of come to the low back, it's said that it generally needs more stability. But I want to have a discussion with you about why that might not always be the case, and if you are someone who needs more mobility perhaps, or if you're someone who needs more stability, or a combination of both. So stay tuned. Let me tell you a little story about the weightlifter, the yogi, and the middle way. Once upon a time, there was a young man named Shane. And from a very early age, he wanted to be big and strong, which obviously led him to getting into things like Olympic weightlifting, where he lifted heavy things from the floor over his head. He also did bodybuilding and powerlifting and was all about basically being fit and muscular. So he trained day and night, lifting weights, sprinting, and he was happy for a time because he had abs. But then in 2011, something happened. In fact, a back injury happened, and he was in a lot of pain. And what he realized is that he needed to work on his mobility. So the first thing that anyone tries when they're in pain and they're stiff and tight and inflexible, what do? They try yoga. But for Shane, yoga was a bit of a different experience. It wasn't blissful like it was for many people. In fact, it was a little unpleasant. But he kept at it, kept stretching slowly but surely. And over time, with a little bit of persistence, he became quite flexible. And his once painful and stiff low back started opening up and becoming flexible. And about this time, he also discovered meditation and started doing meditation courses in the tradition of Mr. Goenka. And both his mind and body opened up, and that old tin man from yoga class gradually became flexible. And his back bridge, his spine, started getting elastic and bendy, and he was able to maintain a little bit of muscle mass at the same time. And all of this yoga stuff was a revolution, speaking personally now, for my stiff guy body. And it eventually led me to writing a book called 10x Your Flexibility, which you can download on my website, which gives you kind of an overview of my journey. I talk about the different stages of flexibility that I went through. But it didn't stop there. I then started training with Ido Portal, who was the now famous trainer of Conor McGregor. And he further inspired me to continue turning my stiff spine into a flexible spine. And I learned loaded stretching around this time, ballistic stretching, took my flexibility to even the next level, getting the head to toe, which is kind of a feat of hamstring flexibility that's pretty advanced. And this led me to writing my second ebook on more advanced flexibility tactics called The Black Book of Flexibility Secrets, which you can also download, where I cover who are the most flexible people in the world, what do they do, why is this different than normal flexibility approaches. And this all culminated in a whole flexibility curriculum called Flexibility University, and one former tin man who was now happy to be flexible. So the take home for me was that the weightlifter was not optimal. I needed mobility. But on the other end of the spectrum, we have the yogi. This is the hyper bendy, hyper flexible person who naturally is this way. This is the yogis, the dancers, the contortionists, people who just are hyper lax and hyper mobile. And this person usually spends almost all of their time, you guessed it, stretching. And when they're not stretching, they're stretching and then stretching some more. When what they really need to do is probably move towards more of the stability end of the spectrum, need to learn how to train their hips and core in a way that stabilizes their low back. using planks and bird dogs and progressing these simple exercises eventually into things more complicated like deadlifting, picking things up off the ground with a stable spine, or squatting. So the reason that these naturally bendy people need more stability training is because excessive joint mobility along with insufficient motor control causes stress. And this hypermobility and poor control is a big, powerful risk factor for low back pain and osteoarthritis. So these bendy people need to know how to build some strength to control their flexibility. Doesn't mean they can't stretch, but they need to have control over the ranges of motion, not just be floppy noodles. And they need to learn how to get in good spinal positions and how to brace and stabilize in those positions. They need to learn how to pick things up off the ground, how to build some strength in and around their spine, and even eventually getting into heavier loading of deadlifts with potentially hundreds of pounds, because strength can be protective. And this can include things like deadlifts, obviously. It can also include squats of various kinds. There's back squats, front squats, overhead squats, goblet squats. There's many tools, but the principle is the same. Can you pick things up off the ground in various shapes and maintain a braced spine that is safe under load? So the take-home message is that neither the weightlifter nor the yogi is optimal. You should be both. You want both mobility and stability. It's not either or. So learn how to deadlift, learn how to bend, learn how to do a back bridge. In fact, like Ido Portal says, move your spine in all kinds of different ranges of motion, because it should be both mobile and stable. That'll give you the most freedom of movement, which is, after all, what we're all looking for.